Hi, here we are again to talk more about views, and what I'd like to do is look at color now. So I've created this example here with some boxes on the screen, and what I want to do is I want to give each of these boxes a different color. Okay, so I like random numbers, and so what I want to do is I want to generate some random numbers just for fun, right? And you know, right now I've set the color to red, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to generate a random color, okay? And there's a couple ways we could do that, okay? So one way of doing that would be to use RGB color. So what we'd need is we'd need 3 random numbers, right? A value for red, green, and blue. Okay, let's do that. So how do you generate random numbers on the computer, and how do you generate a random RGB color, or just any RGB color with UIColor? So let's do this. Let's say let R equal, and we could refactor this into functions and make it a little more clean, but I'm just going to write it all here the long way. So let's do R equals, and to generate a random number, you can use arc4random. Now, people will say arc4random, you know, maybe it's not quite as random as you think it is, but I think for what we're doing, it's just fine, okay? Notice that arc4random returns a uint32, okay? So uint32 is an unsigned integer that's 32 bits long, okay? So just imagine that it returned to us, you know, this 32-bit number that is never negative, right? Because unsigned is just means it doesn't have the minus sign on it, right? Okay. Now this is kind of a problem because pretty much everything that has to do with anything that you display on the screen, whether it be CG rect, CG point, UIColor, right? Frame, bounds, center, all those guys, they all require a CG float. So this is not going to, you know, this isn't going to work as a CG float, right? So we're going to have to convert it to CG float at some point, right? So this returns to us a random number between, 0 and like some millions of values, right? So what I'd like to do is turn that into a number within a range. If I use mod here, I can turn this into a number between 0 and 100 by putting mod 100. Actually, it'll be 0 to 99, which is close enough, right? We could also make it 0 to 87 or 0 to 5 or 4, right? Or 0 to 5, right? Get a random number between 0 and 9. Let's do a random number between 0 and 99, right? And then what I want to do is I want to say, oh, you know what? I used R already up here. Let's just call this red, right? Let's say CG float that random and spell it right. Okay, so we'll take our random int32 mod, which is essentially divide by 100 and give me the remainder, which we saw before gives us a number from 0 to 1 less than this number. And then let's take the answer and convert it to a CG float. Now, the thing about this is, let's just copy this 3 times, right? So I'm just generating some numbers here. I told you earlier that the red, green, and blue values in the previous video were in a range of 0 to 255. Xcode uses a range of 0 to 1. And it's hard to generate a random number from 0 to 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to say green and blue. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this number by 100, right? So I'm going to divide the answer, which is a CG float, by 100, and if I do that, then I'll get a random number from 0 to 1, okay? And we could have done 1,000 here and 1,000 over on this side, and then that would have given us a larger range of randomness, right? Because it would have been 3 digits worth of randomness, but this will be pretty good, I think, for random. And now let's make a color. So what we'll do is we'll say let C equal UIColor. And when I type the parentheses like this, like normally when you get those named colors, these are class class properties that hold a default color, right? And there's a whole bunch of those. But if we just create a new instance of UIColor, the initializer lets us create a color in several different ways, right? We can create it from a CG color, a CI color, a coder, color literal, display P3 red. I don't even know what that one is. There's hue, saturation, brightness, which I talked about in the previous video. We can create a color from a pattern image. We can create a color with red, green, and blue, right? And they include a last one here for alpha, so we can create a transparent color if we want, right? So you'd be able to see through it. That's the alpha, right? So let's make this red. Let's make this one green and make that one blue. And then alpha I'll just set to 1, okay? So, if you remember before, a full value of red, right, would give you the full amount of red in the color. So if I make that 1, and then I make green 0 and blue 0, in Xcode terms, this is like the 255 red. Okay, so that would be red. If I wanted to make yellow, then red and green would both be 1. If I wanted to make magenta, then blue and red would both be 1. I'm going to undo that and get back to my random values. And then what we'll do is we'll say box.background color equals C, because that's our color name, right? And then let's give it a try. That looks pretty good, right? Pretty random, right? So that looks all right. What's another way to make random colors, right? Or not random, but what if you wanted controlled colors? What if you wanted the colors to all cycle through a range? Doing that with red, green, and blue is difficult, okay? Or it depends on the colors, but in a lot of cases it's really difficult. Another way that we could do this is by using UIColor and then using the hue, saturation, brightness, or the HSB style color, right? So I'm going to choose this one, and what I want to do this time is I want to cycle through the rainbow of colors, right? So instead of using these random red, green, and blue, what I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate the hue, right? And then we'll just put the hue in here, right? And I'm going to calculate the hue in this way. I'm going to say the hue is going to be equal to, what is it going to be? It's going to be 1, because 1 would be our full hue, right? Or be red, and then, or 0 would be red, and 1 would be red. Imagine that as a wheel. 0.5 would be halfway around the color wheel, okay? It's a little hard to picture that, but trust me, right? So we're going to say 1 divided by the number of colors that we have, and we should have 10, right? And then what we want to do is we want to multiply by the color that we're on. So imagine that 1 is a circle, okay? It's kind of deep, right? It's a circle. It's complete. It's the whole, right? And I divided it into 10 slices, okay? And as we go around the circle, it's a color wheel, and it goes through all the colors, right? Okay, from red at the top at 0 all the way back around to red at the top again at 1, right? Okay? And so if I divide it into 10 pieces and then I multiply by I, right, then this will cycle through all of the colors from red all the way around, okay? Now I have a problem here because this will now be an integer because I'm doing math. I've included this I right here, which is an integer, right? So what we'll do is we'll say you are going to be a CG float first, and then we'll do our math. And then when I get to hue here, it should say hue is a CG float, right? So let's put hue in here for our color, and saturation can be 1, brightness can be 1, and alpha will be 1. Okay, and then we'll use C again as the background color for our box, right? And then let's test. Hey, there we go. So there's red, orange, kind of a yellowy green to a cyany green to a cyan, light blue, blue, purple, and then kind of a magenta. It's like this purple's going back to red again. If we had one more box here, then it would have ended up as red, right? Okay, so anyway, so there's a couple ideas there for color. I hope that gives you another perspective on color and how you can use it, and this will maybe help you solve the challenges from the questions in the GitHub lesson, right? So anyway, thanks for watching, and good luck.